Today we'll actually be working on stylines. Our topic for today is stylines. And when we talk about stylines, we talk about the form at which appearance, the form at which design, the form at which production is being made through lines on your outfit, on your clothing, right? So now, looking at the board here, we have 5 different style lines which we'll be working through. You can see the number 1, you can see the number 2, the number 3, number 4, and number 5. Now, these are creative style lines which are achieved. You can see the appearance, the design, and when it comes to the production, it's being made through lines, right, on your bodies. So now, we'll actually be working through using dart manipulations in achieving this, because only dart manipulations can make us to achieve this body, so that we don't have a flat look on the bodies, so that we achieve the forms in which a dart creates on the bodies, right? So now we're going through the practical aspects in order for us to have a full understanding of how style lines work through dart manipulations. So come here, everybody. All right, so the first thing first is for you to have your basic bodies block. That's the first thing first. So you have your basic bodies block, right? So now we'll be working with the first pattern in here, right? So now, looking through this, all you need to study first is to interpret your design first. By the time I cover up this, you can see what I have here. We can see the style line in here. And by the time I cover this here, halfway, it is different. So it means this is an asymmetric design, whereby whatsoever is at the half part of your bodies is different from whatsoever that is at the other side of your bodies. But when we talk about symmetric designs now, we're talking about, let's take a look at this. The same style line we have here, we still have the same style line here. So it means this is a symmetric design. When we talk about symmetric, it means whatsoever is on the left side is the same thing with whatsoever is on the right side. Asymmetric designs, it means whatsoever that is on the left side is different from whatsoever that is on the right side. So when we take a look at, let's look at the second bodies we have here. You can see what we have on the right side is totally different from what we have on the left side. So it means this design here is an asymmetric design. Let's take a look at what we have in the number 3. We also have an asymmetric design here. The number 4, we have an asymmetric design here. The only symmetric design we have here is the number 5. Because whatsoever that is on this half part of the bodies is the same thing with what we have on the right part of these bodies. So now we go through the practical aspects. But you need to understand that when you are working with symmetric designs, that is the only way you can use these half bodies here. But when you are working with asymmetric designs, it means you'll be using the full bodies. It means you need a full front of your bodies in order for you to achieve your asymmetric designs. So right here, I'm trying to achieve my full front by merging the 2 bodies I have here together. All right, yeah, so now what I have now, I have my full front, which I'll be working with. So the first thing first for me to do now is to look through my design. Look through my design. Then you need to be able to interpret your design in order for you to create your style line on your body's block. So once you have this on your design, all you need to do is first work with transferring your darts. That's I am introducing your dart manipulations. So now looking through my design, interpreting my design. If I'm to interpret my design now, it means I need a dart through here, and I also need a dart through here before I create my style line. So now I need to transfer my dart. It means I have an arm side dart, right? So now, this is where we will be transferring my dart to in order for me to create my style lines. So the first thing first, and spread method. You are slashing down to the bust point. So now I close up my dart. So the same thing goes to the other side. So I'm trying to tape it down so it doesn't remove. So right here I've transferred my two shoulder darts. So now all I need to do now is to get my style lines. Now studying your design, your style lines came from the shoulder line all the way to your bust point. Then also it came from the side seam connecting back to your bust point. So now let's do that. So now taking a good close look at this, we can see that this style line now is crossing over the dart, isn't it? So now we need to transfer this dart, because when you take a good look at your design here, there are no darts at the waist. Everything has been transferred into the seam lines. So now I need to close up. Automatically the dart is being transferred to the arm side dart in which we've slashed. So now, in order for me not to have this kind of ruffles here, don't forget, we are trying to transfer this dart down to the arm side. So we still need to connect these 2 points together. So now, looking at the style lines, you can see you now have a kind of broken lines due to the fact that we have transferred this dot. So you need to correct that. So with this now, we now have interpreted this. So I begin to slash out my style lines. So preferable now, you need to label your pattern so you don't get it mixed up. Which is my number 1, my number 2. Putting in my grain lines. And my number 3. So right here, I have my first piece, which is here. Thank you. Number 1, number 2, and the number 3. So I have my first piece, which is in number 1. I have my second piece, which is my number 2. And I also have my third piece, which is my number 3. So all we need to do is to add seam allowance. You are adding seam allowance in order for you to join them together. So number 1 connecting to number 2, number 2 connecting to number 3. There are seam allowance of half inch in between them in order for you to sew them back to each other. So that's number 1 connecting to number 2. Then number 2 connecting to number 3. So that is all for the front, for the first design we have there. is curves. Star lines with curves. Now, if you are to interpret this, don't forget, we have a bust point here, right? We also have a bust point here. Now, it means I need to transfer my dot. I have one dot here, and I also have another dot here. So it means both dots, which is your shoulder dot and your waist dot, transferred to your arm side dot here, your side seam dot. Both the shoulder and your waist dot here transferred to your side seam dot in here to create your star lines. Now you need not to forget that this is also an asymmetric design, so it means I will be working with my full front, right? So I'm trying to merge the two fronts together in order for me to have my full front. All right, so now the next step for us is to interpret the design, right? So now let's transfer our dots. You're making use of your French curve. So what I did now was to connect from the shoulder dot, from the bust point to the side seam, and also from my side seam connected to my waist dot here. You can ask me why. Why is because this part I am actually working with the upper part, and for this part I'm working with the lower part. So by the time I connect from here to my shoulder dot, it means I'm still working at the upper part, right? But now I need two star lines. One is at the top and one is at the bottom. That is why I connected for the first one going through my shoulder dot to my side seam, and for the second one from the waist dot through to my side seam. So now the next thing is for us to transfer the dot. So you slash then you close up the dots. You are not just closing up the dots, but you are closing it up totally, making sure that you don't have any room for excess at the shoulder. right? So now, we've done the first step, but once you look at your design, you can realize that there are no darts at the waistline and also at the shoulder. So it means we need to still transfer these two darts to the one you've slashed before. So now I connect. And the reason why you are still connecting this in order for you to slash is because it's a flat pattern making. So, and you know, when transferring your darts, you have to realize that everything becomes flat. If not, it means you've not transferred your darts properly. So you could see how well relaxed everything is, right? So now, we create our style line according to what we have in our design. It comes all the way down to the side seam. This also connects all the way down to the arm circumference with a curve. So from your bust point, you connect it all the way back down. Then also from the bust point, I connect this back to my arm side. So I just continue to slash out. So make sure that you are still closing up the dart totally, so you don't have any excess, so it doesn't affect your sewing. So now I have my first piece, my second piece, and my third piece. Putting up my grain lines so that I know where to cut and not cutting it in bias or crosswise. So this means when I'm cutting, I am placing it on a lengthwise grain. This is my first piece, my second piece, and my third piece. So it means I have my number 1, I have my number 2, which is this, and I also have my number 3, which is this. So now, do you have questions for design asymmetric designs? Okay, so now, as we move on, due to the same process we've been using for the first one, the second one, it still remains the same. But for the fact that this now is a symmetric design, it means we are just working on just one piece of the front, which is just half of the front, not the full front this time, because we are working on the symmetric design. And when I talked about the symmetric design, I told you, due to the fact that what is on the left side is the same thing with what is on the right side, that is how you get a symmetric design. But if it is not the same thing, it means it's an asymmetric design, so you need a full front for it. But now, since we are using a symmetric design, so we just need half of the front. Alright, so now, interpreting my design, what I have here, I have my waist dart, and I also have a curve connecting those darts together in order for me to achieve my style lines. Alright, so now, I need to transfer my dart first and get my style line. So the first thing first I'm going to be doing here now is to transfer my shoulder dart to my waist dart. And how do I do that? It means I need to connect the two dart points together. Then I slash out one dart leg of the waist dart down to my bust point. Then I'll be closing up the shoulder dart. Alright, so now it means what I have here now, my dart width for the waistline has increased. So it means it's coming all the way from this point down to this point here. Right? So now don't forget, I have a style line coming all the way. If this is half of my bodice now. I already have my dart. So now, my style line comes all the way from my center front, connecting back to my bust point with a curve now. So depending on how you want the curve to look like in your design, you connect it back to your bust point. All right, so we have this connecting back from our center front all the way down to our waist dart. So now once we have this now, all you just need to do is to slash out Let me do my labeling first. Then I have my green line. So now don't forget, you have a dart width here in which you are eliminating because it's going to be connecting now with a seam line. Back to your bust point. Then your style line is what you'll be slashing out down to your bust point. So now you have the first piece and you have the second piece. The first piece and also the second piece. So by the time you connect these two stitches together, it gives you this. Not forgetting the fact that you are cutting it on fold. You are cutting the center front on fold. So by the time you have a full front, it forms your design. So here now we move on to the third one, which is the number 3 here. We've done number 1, number 2, number 5. So now let's do number 3. Now you can see what we have here now. Based on the definition of the style lines, we can see that this is a design and is appearing like a creative design, coming all the way as a French dart to the bust point. Then you will now see that there's another seam line coming from that your style line all the way back to your bust point. Now, don't forget this is an asymmetric design, so it means we are working with the full fronts this time around. Connect the two center fronts together. So here is my full front ready for me to start working on. So now the first thing first I will be doing is to transfer my darts before I get my style lines. And where do I transfer my darts to now? I have 2 darts here, which is 1 here, and also another 1 here. Then my style line continues from here. Right? So now, this could be a little tricky because we have the, what do you call it? The style line going over your darts. Just like the way we have it on the first example I did. So now all you need to do now for us to transfer this dart, let's create our style lines. So the first style line I'll be creating is from the right bust point, trying to form my French dart. But now you need to close up these darts so that you have a straight line connecting each other. And also I get my second star line. Okay, so now I continue by slashing out in order for me to transfer my darts. So I'm slashing it all through to my shoulder bust point. I'll be closing up my shoulder dart first. Which is the first dart I'm transferring now. Right? So that is the first dart I transferred. I continue slashing out back to the other bust point. I close up my second shoulder dart. Right? So now I need to close up the waist dart now. So I connect the 2 points together. I slash out. Then I close it up. So now don't forget, I still have a dart opening here, which I'm not in need of. So now I slash out my star line all the way back to this point. In order for me to close up my dart. So don't forget, you have to be very careful so you don't mix up the pieces you've cut out. So right here, I have my full piece, right? So now if I'm to connect them together, it means I am adding my sewing allowance ½ inch all the way back to this place in order for me to sew them together. It might be a little bit tricky, but you just have to be patient when doing the sewing. So the seam line comes all the way back to the bust point. So do you have any question for me? Okay. So now when you are cutting, okay, let me try and fill that space up. So for the sake of when you are cutting, that space is meant to be occupied. You are not slashing all through back to this space here. What you are cutting, let me try and bring it out. You are adding ½ inch So this is how you'll be adding the sewing allowance to it in order for you to sew. Right? So the first thing first you'll be doing is to sew these two parts together before you now sew all the way down to merge these two parts to each other. Do we get this? Do you have any question for me? Move on to the last one here, which is the number 4. Now taking a look at this, this is another tricky one which we have here, but not in a straight lines now. Now it is in a curve, coming all the way from your shoulder to your bust point, from the left bust point to the right bust point, down to your side seam. Now, don't forget, this is actually an asymmetric design because what we have on the right side, the style line we have on the right side, is different from the style line we have on the left side. Right? So now it means we are working with the full front bodice block. Try to merge the two fronts to each other. Okay, so I'll be trying to merge the two fronts to each other. Making sure you are merging it properly without adding any excess. Okay, so now let me draw out my style lines before transferring my darts into those style lines. The first style line comes from the shoulder all through with the bust point, connecting back to the second bust point down to your side seam with a curve. So now it means from our bust point, the shoulder bust point, coming down all the way, back to the second bust point, down to my side seam. So now let me cuff out. From my bust point down to the second bust point. You can see how I'm making use of my French curve. Down to your side seam. So now we have the style lines now. So now all we need to do now is to begin to slash in order for us to transfer our dart. So the first thing first, which I will be doing, is to transfer my shoulder dart. But before then, let me slash out my style line. So I begin to close up my dart. I close up the second shoulder dart. So now I begin to close up my waist dart. Let me see if this can move. Okay. Then also I close up this. So in order for me not to have the ruffles here, I would like to slash that part. Oh, sorry, I forgot. It's meant to come all the way from the shoulder. Sorry, I'm not supposed to close up this dart. So all I need to do there is to cut out the dart. So we are just turning that dart down as a seam line. Yeah, right. So you can see where interpretation of designs comes in. So with what I have here now, I have my first piece and I have my second piece. I put in my grain line. So I have my second piece here, and I also have my first piece. So I hope you can see this. My first piece and my second piece. So if I'm to add my sewing allowance, I'm adding my sewing allowance just as my style line is here, 1/2 inch on each piece, in order for me to match them back together when sewing. So far so good. Do you have any question for me? If it's manipulating that so that we don't have our bodies to be flat. So it means we still have the effect of the dart, and also we still have the style lines coming in. So those two things are working hand in hand in order for you to have your style lines on the bodies, decorative style lines on the bodies. So you can see the appearance of the designs, you can see the production of the design coming out on your bodies. Any question for me?